I'm not sure how you think about this, but in all my years of parish ministry, the one aspect of the life and ministry of Jesus, I think the Ascension has caused most people that I know, and even myself, the most angst. We really don't know what exactly to think about it. Professor Farrow of McGill University, in his book on Ascension and Ecclesiology, looks at how all sorts of understandings and misunderstandings on the Ascension have helped us slide into dangerous and muddled ideas and practices. So it seems to me that we need to take the Ascension seriously, for it is not an added extra, it is a central part of the story of Jesus, and therefore the story of salvation. And one of the first problems we have is that we seem to conflate the resurrection and the Ascension. I don't know why, but we just seem to do. They are connected, but they are separate. They're not the same. Saying Jesus is raised from the dead is not the same as saying that he has ascended into heaven. All the New Testament writers make the distinction, and so, by the way, did Jesus. In John 20, verse 17, he says, "Do not touch me, I have not yet ascended to my Father." There is a clear distinction for Jesus between his resurrection and his ascension. All the writers in the New Testament spoke of Jesus as having lived our life, died on a cross, rose after 3 days, ascended into heaven, and will come again. But please note, there are commas between each statement. Lived our life, comma, died on a cross, comma, rose after 3 days, comma, ascended into heaven, and will come again. Of course, Jesus cannot rise from the dead if he doesn't die. He can't ascend into heaven if he is in the grave. However, that does not mean they are the same thing. A second problem with the Ascension is that his disappearance, for some, simply allows him to be spiritually present with us everywhere. But this is not right. The problem with this view is it falls into spiritualism. Jesus simply disappeared, but that is not what the New Testament clearly says. He bodily ascended. If you have this disappeared view, though, it's then very easy to go back to the resurrection and say that this was spiritual as well, not bodily. But again, the New Testament is very clear. It was bodily resurrection, bodily ascension. How that is usually expressed is that Jesus went to heaven when he died. Actually, no, he died and he rested in the grave. Jesus speaks of being in paradise to the so-called good thief, but this is not heaven. The further problem with this disappearance model is that it reduces the second coming of Jesus to simply Jesus' continual presence spiritually in the here and now. And what you have when you go down that road is that there's no need to look for Jesus' second coming. He's already here spiritually. But this is not Christianity expressed in the New Testament. It actually draws more on Platonism than anything else, but it's definitely not New Testament Christianity. A third problem with our understanding of the Ascension comes from an ancient heresy called modalism, and you can now look it up, but there's many forms of the heresy and a few varieties. The second person of the Trinity in this model stops being God when he takes on human form and takes on our humanity in the person of Jesus. And then when he ascends, however that might be expressed, he resumes his divinity again, sloughing off his humanity. Again, this is simply not the Christianity that is expressed in the New Testament. Still yet another complication in trying to work out what the Ascension might mean is our worldviews, or our understanding of how the world operates. The ancients had a worldview. They spoke of heaven as the realm of the gods, the earth, our realm, and the underworld as the realm of the dead. The Jews are a bit different, though. They spoke of God as being accessible. They couldn't see him, that's true, but he was still accessible. For example, Moses went up on the mountain to receive the Torah, but that didn't mean that God was somewhere up there. The mountain simply represented the difference and difficulty of the accessibility to God. He is near, but it's hard to get to him. You have to work at it. And in any case, it's God who reveals himself to us, not we go finding God. However, God makes it very easy to understand that he is right there with him. For example, the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. God is truly present with them as they journey. When we come to reflect on something like the Transfiguration, Jesus is not taken up anywhere, he is transfigured. He is revealed in his true nature. He is showing them what they cannot see normally by looking at him, that he is truly divine as well as truly human. But he's standing there right before them. Unfortunately, we seem to have forgotten all this and taken the more Greek or Roman view of the gods, and so we have the strange stained glass windows with a cloud and 2 feet sticking out of the bottom, making Jesus look like he's a first spaceman or something. In biblical cosmology, heaven is not 2 different locations in the same time-space continuum. Heaven, they are different dimensions of God's good creation, that is heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are 2 different dimensions of God's good creation. Wright again is very helpful in his book Surprised by Hope. He reminds us that the point of heaven is twofold. First, heaven relates sort of tangentially to earth, so that the one who is physically in heaven can also be simultaneously anywhere and everywhere on earth. The ascension is necessary so that Jesus is available and accessible anywhere at any time, without us having to go looking for him in a mountain or somewhere else. Just as an aside, when all this misunderstanding of the ascension plays out, is something like a sect that existed in Sydney many years ago, who believed that Jesus was going to return by walking on water through Sydney Heads. Can't fault them, it's a really nice harbour. They constructed an amphitheatre on what is now called Grotto Point, and it's now a navigational marker for entering Sydney Harbour or leaving Sydney Harbour, but not for Jesus. Second, heaven is the place where God rules. I'm not so sure that I like Wright's analogy that it's the CEO's office. I understand what he's saying, but I just don't think it's all that helpful. It is where God rules. It is where God reigns. Although some CEOs think that they rule and reign, don't they? We see this, though, in the Revelation of John. There's a throne and one who looks like a lamb is sitting on it. That means that somebody is ruling, somebody is reigning. The idea of a thoroughly physical, risen, embodied Jesus in heaven might come as a shock to a lot of people. But here is the problem. If we make all the mistakes that I've spoken about, and we thus completely miss the point of the ascension, then what happens? Well, the church fills the void. Here again, Wright is helpful. If Jesus is more or less identical with the church, that is to say, we speak about his presence with his people, rather than standing over and against them, addressing us all from somewhere else as our Lord and King, dare I say, our Master, then we descend into triumphalism. Not everyone, but most. We are the greatest because Jesus is with us. What we should be portraying is Jesus is Lord and Master, and we are his servants. But you can't do that if you make Jesus and the church equative. What we need to grasp as the people of God, as we reflect on the ascension, is that the one who is indeed present with us by the Spirit is also the Lord who is strangely absent, strangely other, strangely different. The Ascension, as reflected in the teachings of the New Testament, speak of a Jesus who remains truly human and in an important sense absent from us, while at the same time that we just can't always get our heads around, he is present to us in a new way. At one point he is present through the Spirit. At another point he is present through the sacraments. Again, Wright helpfully reminds us, and me, for I am guilty of this as well, he reminds us that in our desire to encourage our people to know that Jesus is truly present, and by the way he is, at the same time he is also truly absent, for he is. The early church spoke about this reality thus: he's still here, but he's not with us. The mystery of the Ascension is ultimately just that, a mystery. And for we modern people who have uncovered the secrets of much of our lives and our universe, we do not seem to have an appreciation of mystery anymore. This is sad. Having an appreciation of mystery reminds us to be humble. We don't know everything. The Ascension reminds us of our actual limitations of our thinking, and we would do well to continue to think very carefully on the Ascension, for it is integral to our Christian faith. But let us not do so falling into the old traps of the past, but look again with fresh eyes on this marvellous mystery of the God who reigns, who is accessible, who is present and yet absent, and calls us to follow him each and every day of our lives. The Lord be with you.